You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetease.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetease.com. And you can check out our website, outoftheboxpodcast.com, and click on the support button. We have a new affiliate program. If you support some of our affiliates, we'll get a little kickback. I'm here today with Advocate Joann Buttaro. Joann, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. I am really excited to have you here because you speak out about an issue that's very close to my heart. Joann, you talk about violence against women and sexual assault. And why don't we tell our listeners a little bit about your story?
Okay. I was 10 years ago drugged and date raped. And I met the guy on Match.com. And we had one date and went after having a couple of drinks out at a few bars in Philadelphia. We went back to his apartment. He drugged a non-alcoholic drink. It doesn't matter what they put it in.
You can't taste it at all.
You cannot taste it. I took one sip of the drink and I don't remember anything for about 8 hours until I woke up the next morning naked in his bed.
I think it's really important to speak out about this because, you know, I know obviously Yes All Women has been, you know, going crazy on Twitter and it's been in the atmosphere, kind of sexual violence and rape culture and stuff like that. But a lot of people still don't take it seriously. You know, I know so many people who still believe that women are making it up or certain women are, you know, crazy or whatever. I've been sexually assaulted twice and it's just such an important issue for men to understand because I don't think that I think as women we have that shared understanding, but a lot of men still think, you know, they're just like oblivious to the whole world of that culture.
Right. Yes, I think that the more we speak and when I meet other victims/survivors, they will have a story to tell, and it can be similar and it can be 180 degrees different. Unfortunately, there are so many ways that a woman can be violated, assaulted, raped. There are so many different stories you can't even imagine. There are like my story where they put drugs in your drink. There are stories where women were on dates and then were assaulted by knife point, or there's so many different ways women can be assaulted, and we need to get the story out there that more often than not, it's someone they know. I believe it's 80%.
It's usually someone they know. And I want to break the stereotype of the creepy stranger in the alleyway. And that does happen.
Yes.
But that's more rare. That guy in the alleyway hiding and you have, you know, need to bring your mace with you. More often or not, you know, it's someone that you know or that you've gotten acquainted with. Mm-hmm. And in your case, the guy was good looking.
Yes.
Which it's hard for me because I was, you know, actually one of the times that I was assaulted was from a boyfriend, and people will say, well, how can you be assaulted? It was your boyfriend.
Right.
Well, if you don't want to have the act and the person is aggressive and manipulative or violent, well, there you go.
Right.
And so a lot of times people say, well, how can your husband or how can your boyfriend do that to you? That's your husband or boyfriend. Like, I don't get it. I've heard that a lot.
Right. That's another thing that we need to talk about a lot is that it doesn't matter how well you knew them, what the relationship was. If you said no and you said no once or you shook your head no or in any way whatsoever, it's an assault. And that's what people really need to talk about. It's never the woman's fault. It's always the attacker's fault. The woman, I'm just trying to say that no means no, no matter how.
So what about people who say, well, what about she was into it? She said she liked aggressive stuff, this and this and that. You know, how do you know, blah, 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 blah. Because I've heard guys say that, you know, to my face, knowing that I was a victim of assault. Well, how do you know?
Well, because they're saying no, and and I'm sure the look on their face changes. I'm sure their body language changes, and maybe they should be more in tune to the woman and not what they're doing. And yes, you could have been into kissing him. I was kissing the guy that I was with. I had no intentions whatsoever of having sex with him that night. We were gonna talk, we were gonna have a drink, and I was gonna go home. That's why I wasn't even drinking alcohol at the point, because I had to drive home. So you can be with a woman. I'm speaking to the guys right now. You can be with a woman and you can be kissing, and both of you can be into it. But if she pulls back and says no, she's done, and you need to be done.
And it's, I know Joanne's speaking about women, but obviously sexual assault can happen to anyone. I know there has been incidences, women on women, the lesbian community, yes, or in the, gay community, men being assaulted or too drunk or whatever. If someone doesn't know what's going on, it's better just to stop.
Yes. Yes, and fortunately, there is more speak out about the men being assaulted. There are some wonderful groups out there for men who have been assaulted, and then there's also some groups for the LGBT community. So it's starting to be talked about more in the mainstream, which is a good thing, but it's not enough until everyone out there understands and can have a conversation. Then we need to keep talking.
Well, I think that there's this idea, I know in the comedy community, because I'm a comedian, there's a lot of male aggression with the idea of rape culture. I've heard so many comedians making jokes about it, male comedians, mm-hmm, of course, and just saying, oh, it's not real. It's like a PC thing that's being made up. And I mean, you would be surprised the amount of jokes that are made about this culture, but it's pretty clear, I think, to most women that it's a real phenomenon. It's not some PC, left-wing propaganda. Because do you know what the actual statistic is in college women? I think it's 1 in 4. Right?
Yes.
1 in 4?
1 in 4, yes. And it's 1 in 6 men. Mm-hmm.
And how many of those go, and that number isn't even accurate because how many go unreported?
Right.
My first incident was unreported because I spoke about this, if you guys remember my episode with Bobby Oliver, my lovely friend, comedian, and feminist. Where the guy actually embarrassed and shamed me. And I was very young. I was 19, and I was so embarrassed that I didn't know to report it, but I was embarrassed to say anything because we all had the same group of friends, because it was someone I knew.
Right.
And so I felt that if I would to report it, I would have broken up our group of friends.
Right.
And so here I am having a major crime and physical violation, and yet I was scared.
You were the one that was shamed.
Exactly.
Yes. And it should have been the other way around. Unfortunately, it wasn't.
He wasn't embarrassed at all. In fact, he
right.
went and bragged about it to friends, which is what shamed me. He went around telling everyone that I was a, big hoe and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, I was like, that's not what I remember happening. Like, I almost thought I was crazy.
Right.
I was like, am I a crazy person? Because I'm pretty sure I was really against it and not super into it. So I don't know why he's telling everyone that.
Right.
And I actually had our male friends. We were in a group of male and female friends coming up to me and saying, oh, I heard this and that about you, and giving me a heart. And I was just so mortified that I just froze.
Right.
And unfortunately, I was young and didn't know what the proper things were to do or the steps to take.
Yeah, you just didn't say anything. You didn't defend yourself. You just said nothing because, like you said, and a lot of times if you are younger, you're less experienced in dating, and which is not a bad thing. It just is, but. And then on the flip side, with my case, I was 37. I had been dating for a long time. It was when I woke up the next morning, it didn't nothing made sense. You know, I was like, wait a second. And because I didn't remember anything.
Did you immediately have a guess what happened, or were you just totally confused?
Well, I was sick. You know, when you're given a date rape drug, it affects you and it makes you violently ill. So when you come out of it, you feel like you have the worst hangover you could ever imagine. Anyone out there who's had a hangover, imagine times 100.
And you hadn't been drinking, so you were like, what's going on here?
Right. Yeah. So that was, you know, none of it made sense. Why was I so sick? I only had 3 drinks.
You were like, I had 3 Sprites. What's going on here?
And I was like, well, you know, when you go out on a date, you don't eat a lot before because you want to look good, right? So I hadn't eaten anything for a while before the date. So yeah, I was trying to rationalize it in my head, and I shouldn't have been, because, you know, it was 10 years ago. There was not a lot of talk about drugging and date raping. Now there is, and thankfully there are a lot of women out there who are aware, and they talk about the never leaving your drink and all the things you can do just to protect yourself. But nobody talks about it then. So when I woke up the next morning, I wasn't thinking, oh my God, he drugged my drink and, you know, he raped me. So when I woke up, I was physically ill. So, and obviously we both didn't have our clothes on, and I knew right then and there, you know, we had sex. I knew I didn't remember. I had never previously had sex with someone and not remembered. So I knew things were wrong. But, again, I just brushed it aside. I took responsibility for myself, thinking I was the one who consented when I never really did. So it was confusing.
So what happened after? Did you run out of the place? Did you go and immediately go to, you know, a medical center, or were you confused, didn't know what was going on?
Well, in my case with my attacker, he was a serial date rapist. He had done this many times before, and unfortunately many times after me. So
how did you become aware of this?
Well, a year and a half later, I received a call from the district attorney's office of Philadelphia. I lived in New Jersey at the time. And, you know, a lot of times you would, because you're only a few miles outside the city, a lot of people from Philly met people from Jersey. And so, you know, I met him on Match.com, and it was close proximity. So it wasn't anything unusual to date someone from the city. So I received a call from the district attorney's office because they were investigating him. It's, I guess, to make a long story short, he had been accused by 3 other women, and he had been arrested. There was a trial.
So you had never pressed charges against him at that point? I did not. At that point?
Because, I just woke up, and he was nice to me. So this is where I was getting at. He was nice to me.
The next morning.
He was nice to all the women. So which also confuses you.
You're like, what's going on?
Thank you. Yeah. You because you wouldn't think that if he was violent against you physically or however, you wouldn't think he was going to be nice to you the next day. So now you're thinking, okay, he's nice to me, so I must have consented, and I just don't remember. And so I just wanted to go home. I wasn't feeling well, and I just wanted to put it behind me, honestly, because I guess I was embarrassed because I didn't want to have sex with him, and I did. And I was saying that he was a serial date rapist. So I received a call, and all the things that didn't make sense to me, they were asking me if I knew him, how I knew him, why they were investigating him, and then a whole flood of memories, and I always call it a puzzle. The puzzle all came back together a year and a half later.
So you did have memories after the fact?
It wasn't memories of the assault. It was what happened before and after, and then I put it all together. Mm-hmm. Why I didn't remember, why how I woke up with, out having my clothes on, and just I was able to put all the pieces together, and it made sense, because he was a serial date rapist, and he had done this. The story when the trial came about, the stories that the women told were almost verbatim.
Identical.
Yeah, because when a violent offender does something repeatedly, they do it the same way because it works for them. So the same
and it's safe in a way because they're not going to get caught. They haven't been caught. They're
doing
it that way. They're going to keep it in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's how the whole ball got rolling with my.
So you went to trial and you testified against him.
I went to preliminary hearing. I testified in the preliminary hearing. I did not testify at trial. There were plenty of other victims.
How many other women were there at that point?
In the trial, there were 7, but at the preliminary hearing, they had 11. Oh my gosh! So and there were many more. They had over 20 really good cases, but then there were women who didn't want to go to trial.
They were embarrassed or scared or shamed.
Or the DA felt that it just wasn't going to be enough. So the
DA's like, there's too many women.
Yeah.
We can't put all of these women with the exact same story. This is horrible.
Yeah. But I know. So I gave a 2-hour statement to the Special Victims Unit detective. It was a week before Christmas, and it was December 2005. It was the worst week of my life. I couldn't even believe what was happening to me. It was a whirlwind. I was calling my doctor so I can get every blood test taken. I didn't, once I found out what happened, I realized that I need to make sure I was still healthy.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballed from there.
Did this guy ever get convicted?
Yes, he was convicted of 2 counts of sexual assault in what was really his second trial. The first trial he was acquitted, but the second trial, the one that I was involved with, 2 counts.
So what does that mean, acquitted?
The 3 women who accused him in the very first trial, they found him not guilty.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's another, so I wanted to bring that up. That is another issue, and it's an issue that I dealt with after being sexually assaulted. And, I've talked about this with other women, is that there's a fear of putting your life out there and then the guy gets off. Mm-hmm. And then you're seen a certain way, or you're, again, I was young and I didn't know about pressing charges and I didn't really understand what had happened to me until I was older. But I know many women who have been assaulted and they're like, I don't want to just drag my life down the drain to, it was the one thing, I'll get over it, whatever. And then these guys are serial attackers.
Yes.
But as a woman, that's a lot to put that out there.
Yes.
And, for me, I come from a very traditional family and I was already embarrassed having relationships with men outside of marriage. So it's like this whole cultural thing too.
Right. You had, and I'm sure that's with a lot of other women, there's a lot other things going on behind the scenes, just besides the fact that you were assaulted. There was, can I put my story out there? Can I tell this to someone? Am I going to get the support I need from, I was lucky. Philadelphia had a special unit in the district attorney's office for sexual offenders. They had a special victims unit, exactly like the ones you see on TV.
On Law and Order.
Yep. Special detectives that are angels, and we didn't get to this yet, but there are a lot of them all over the country, but they had a wonderful rape crisis center where I got counseling. So, but it's not like that in every city, and even some large cities do not have the funding to have the training for their officers and their district attorneys. So you don't know what kind of support you're going to get. You don't know if you're going to walk in, tell your story, and the detective is going to be supportive. There's a group, actually, the prosecutor who was the chief of the unit in Philadelphia, he now works for a group called Equitas, and they go around training district attorneys all over the country. There's all these little things going on now that people are trying to get it out there, but So the trial had 7 women stand up and tell almost the same story. They had put 37 charges on him for rape, sexual assault, and there's charges for if you rape a woman and have drugged them, or it's for holding them against their will. It's almost like
kidnapping or something.
Yes, yeah. It's similar to that. He did get 21 years sentencing in Pennsylvania. But the way they found my information was when he was out on bail for the first trial, he fled Pennsylvania, went to Idaho, and raped again. So that woman woke up the next morning, went to the police, got a rape kit, and they had eyewitnesses. So they executed a search warrant, found his computer with my profile, all these other women's profiles, the date rape drug that he was making himself. So that's how the whole thing got started. So after the trial in Philadelphia, flash forward a year and a half, I was thankfully given the opportunity to write a victim's impact statement for that trial. He was found guilty of rape and then given a life sentence. So I'm one of what you call the lucky survivors who doesn't have to worry about her attacker ever seeing the light of day again. Unfortunately, it's very rare.
A lot of the guys just get a slap on the wrist.
Yes. Just the other day, I sat with 2 other women, and their attackers did get jail time, but now they're out. So I can't even imagine what that would feel like. And that's the most common thing.
Dozens or hundreds or even thousands of men who aren't even getting to the trial because women, like me, are scared or embarrassed or don't know what to do or lost and confused.
Yeah, I have been to several speak outs. Take Back the Night was, Sexual Assault Awareness Month was in April, so I attended several speak outs, and I had the past couple of years also. And you sit there with other victims who have to walk into their offices, their college campuses, down the street, and they walk past their attackers sometimes on a weekly basis.
And they have to pretend like nothing happened or have that feeling inside them.
Right. Yeah. Because they don't want to think about it. They don't want to go to the police. So for whatever their personal reason is, it was my mission to do whatever it was to get him behind bars, my attacker. But it's a personal choice. I don't ever judge a woman who decides either way because I know how hard it is. Those were the hardest years of my life ever. I know that I can do anything now because they were awful. So I would never judge a woman whether they go to the police or not because it is the most personal choice you're ever going to make.
I think it is a personal choice, and I do regret not pressing charges. However, I don't know if this is just a karma thing, and I kind of believe it is. This may sound horrible because I really do not want to wish any horrible things on other people, but one of my attackers, actually both of my attackers, have had a pretty rough time since the attack. So I just believe that there's a higher power that kind of gave them some karma. One was, and again, I don't wish bad things on people, but one was in a horrible car accident. He's still alive. And the other one lost his job and kind of had a downward path. And so I would like to think that people who are out to maybe not be as honest or not be as honorable in their life, maybe are attracting some negative energy as well.
And you don't have to wish or feel bad about the negative things that happen because eventually bad things do happen to bad people. And so you don't have to, and when you hear about it, it's okay to feel good.
I felt one of them. I kind of felt good, and I felt bad about feeling good because I'm a really nice person. Everyone always says that. Oh, well, you're so nice. You're so nice. But a couple of my guy friends who knew about the assault the second assault actually called me and contacted me and told me, and they were happy because after it happened, I have a lot of big brother types in my life who are very loving and supportive of women, and they wanted to physically attack the person. And, you know, that wasn't, and also, you know, like I said, one of the people was someone I had an intimate relationship with. And so I was totally mixed because I was like, well, I still have feelings for this guy, but also he did attack me.
Right.
So there's so many confusing emotions.
Yes. And
I do regret not pressing charges. And I have talked to a lawyer and other people since then. And they felt that, and, you know, maybe this is wrong, that it was not too late, but that the lawyer I spoke to said rape cases are the hardest to prosecute because it's he said, she said, unless there's witnesses and a rape kit is done and other things like that. And so I just felt kind of hopeless about it. And so I just prayed and tried to let it go. Right. And that was my choice. But I do regret it. Right. And I acknowledge you for taking that step and actually going forward with it.
Thank you.
And taking that guy off the street.
And the circumstances, you know, a lot of the prosecutors and, you know, you were given certain advice because they have to look at the big picture. They have to look at what you're going to go through, and is it worth it to take you through that? Because it's traumatizing. If they know we just don't think we can get what we want to get out of it, and they don't want to put you through that, knowing that they really don't think they can get a conviction or even an arrest.
So why do you think it's so hard to get a conviction or arrest? Is it what my lawyer told me, because it's a he said, she said situation? You need what is the reason that it's so hard to get these creeps off the street?
Well, in my case, I can speak to the fact that we had the support of the district attorney and the police, but once it went to trial, I have no qualms about saying that the jury in Philadelphia failed, and they're sitting there looking at this overpriced defense attorney, and he's slick and telling them a story about how, my attacker, he was sort of a persona. He
he was good looking.
He was good looking, but he told everyone he was either a doctor, an astronaut, a CIA agent. He wasn't any of those things. His whole life was fake. The only thing that was real was his name. So
he had these alternate egos that he would use. Did he have some type of personality disorder, or was it just a ploy to get women?
No, they believe that he is your classic psychopath.
Sociopath type person.
Yes. Yeah. Doesn't believe he did anything wrong. The defense attorney got up and said all the women that he attacked were just bitter because when they found out he wasn't a doctor, we were bitter. And he had a type. The women that he picked off a match or had met, they were all educated, independent, had careers, some own their own homes. So most people would think, well, I wouldn't think they would be that bitter because they really have their own thing going on. But, you know, when you have a jury in a city, you really aren't getting your peers. You know, they say it's a jury of your peers. It's not, because if the lawyer gets to pick who the jury is out of a pool, a lot of times they get the type of juror that they know will work for them. And in my case, in Philadelphia, they got the type of jury they knew was going to be in their favor.
You look like you're walking on eggshells, like you don't want to say what type of jury was it.
Don't.
You'll have to tell me off the air. I'm like, what type of person were you talking about?
I don't, but I was told
people that were maybe easily manipulated. Let's say that.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, we see cases on the news all the time, and I got to see. I sat in the courtroom. I watched the closing arguments. I looked in the faces of 12 jurors, and I looked at them hard because they were important people to me and all the other victims that I was sitting next to. So, you know, it's hard to look at people and know that you're putting your trust in them. And like you said, there are people that easily believe stories that are told to them by really highly intelligent defense attorneys who know how to spin.
I also think that there's still a large amount of stereotyping, bigotry, racism, and other things that affect the system, because the times that I have had really bad experiences with, well, I think they say that, I don't know the statistics, so I don't want to quote it, but I think if you're a black male or Hispanic male, you have a higher chance, or if you're from a lower income neighborhood or you have a certain look. My attacker was also, you know, a good looking guy, had a very certain look to him. And even when we were together, there was one incident where, not the rape, but he actually was arrested for something. And I think he had been violent with me and other things, and I secretly was happy that he had been arrested, and I went to his trial, and the judge just was like, oh, you seem like a good kid who wouldn't do anything wrong, and he didn't get any jail time. And I know for a fact if he was black, he would have been put in jail. Yeah,
the jury was looking at my attacker at the table, and, you know, here's this, you know, good looking guy, and here's his attorney defending him and telling them that he couldn't have done this. You know,
he didn't look like a hoodlum. He didn't look. They're like, why would he need to do that?
Yeah,
he's a good-looking guy.
Exactly.
Why would
those words were used?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So there's that's what I mean by there's a stereotype out there. Is people, whether they're your peers or not, are coming into a situation with their predetermined judgments and their predetermined stereotypes. And I think that that's something that's really, you know, messed up with the justice system. It sounded like you had a really great, like you said, support system in Philadelphia. But I know, you know, I just heard a story the other day on NPR because, like I said, with Yes All Women, this has been a little bit in the buzzosphere. Of a young girl who was date raped by over 15 men, and it was a gang rape, and she was re-victimized in the system because she had to watch a video of herself being raped.
Oh my God.
I guess they videotaped it, and the judge was a female judge and said, you know, our system is broken because this poor girl is being re-victimized by having to watch this videotape of herself, and then all of the rapist were there in the courtroom, sitting there staring, you know, mad dogging her the whole time for pressing charges. And meanwhile, this girl, you know, was gang raped by 15 guys.
Right.
And it's not funny, but it's so crazy that no one would think, hey, maybe this is traumatic to her to take the stand in this way. Can't she just be, you know, interrogated privately or whatever?
Right. Wherever it happened, they weren't properly trained in how to make sure the victim isn't re-victimized. I mean, look what happened in now the backlash, thank God, but look what happened in Steubenville. I mean, that was awful what happened to that girl. And then, you know, here it's all over the news, and, you know, everyone's, like you said about stereotypes, everyone's, you know, coming out and defending guys that are athletes on the football team. Who cares what they are and what they do? You know, like, I don't care who you are, what you look like.
If you're attacking someone, if you're doing something that's, you know, illegal and morally wrong, you should be punished for it.
Yeah. I mean, there are people out there that don't make a lot of money, and they get up and they go to work every day and they work hard and they live a good life. And then there are people that look good and, you know, have money and have the best education, and they're the crappiest people on the planet. So, you know, we need to figure out how to get stereotypes out of the courtroom, at least.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's something that I really felt frustrated with was, one, you know, people were, when I tried to reach out and get help, the second time I was assaulted, I had, you know, mutual friends again saying, well, why would he do that to you? He's your boyfriend, number one. And then two, he was a really good looking guy.
Right.
So, well, why would he need to do that, Rosie? And this was male and female, where I was like, okay, can I get some support? Like, what's going on here? And so I think the stigmas are starting to change finally.
Yeah.
Because the media has been blowing up about it, and there's been a lot of awareness recently. But it needs to go further, because it shouldn't. I'm the type of comedian, I'm open to fair game. If someone wants to make a joke about something and it's funny and intelligent and witty, and there's a well thought out thing, and it happens to be about rape, that's fine. But if you're just going up there and making fun of the fact that, because whatever someone says is a reflection of their consciousness. So if you're making jokes about rape culture that it's like this silly thing and it doesn't exist, then you're reflecting the consciousness of maybe not only yourself, but of society in general, that's how people feel.
Right.
Because people are laughing at it. If I heard a joke like that, I wouldn't laugh.
Right.
Because I don't feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's jokes that are off that I'm going to laugh out. I mean, I'm not, just because I had a bad experience about a lot of things in my life doesn't mean I can't think things are funny. It just has to be told in the right way. And
it has to be told in a clever and funny way. It can't just be, and I have a very dark sense of humor, and I've had, a lot of jokes that could be considered offensive. But when it comes to something like that, what I'm noticing is that a lot of white males, and, this is just my personal experience, are not taking the rape culture seriously. It's still a joke.
Yeah.
It's still like this PC, like BS.
Yeah.
And as a woman, I'm not the type that's hyper vigilant, always worried, always looking around the corner, checking my drink. But I've been a victim, and I know that it's a real thing and it's out there.
Yeah, exactly.
And we need to be sensitive to that and notice. I totally hate the over PC culture.
Yes,
but
I know, I do too.
It bugs me, like crazy. But I also don't like, innocent women being victimized and nothing happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's just anyone who's out there listening right now. Unfortunately, you don't realize that if you're in a room with 10 people, you're probably in a room with 1 or 2 victims of sexual assault. And you don't want to think that's true, but you have no idea. I mean, I kept this from so many people for so long, and you walk around with this secret. Nobody's going to know it until you tell it. So that's why everyone out there needs to be more compassionate and believe the woman when she says something happened.
What is the percentage of actual rape stories that are predicted to be quote unquote made up?
I don't know. It's small.
It's pretty low.
It's tiny. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know that statistic, but I just know it's a very small percentage.
And I don't know why a woman would make that up, because it's such a traumatic thing and the stigma around it is so strong that I can't find any incentive, unless the woman was really just a nut job and wanted attention or something like that. But I would say the percentage is probably pretty low.
Yeah.
I don't right at this point see any logical reason for a woman to make it up, other than if she was off her rocker. So if the woman seems like a logical person, I would say, for her to say that out loud and all the risks associated with it, it probably happened.
Yeah. Yeah. When I hear stories, when I hear things on the news, I'm always, the first thing I'm going to do is support the woman, the victim, whatever, you're going to have to prove to me that she made it up. Because after going through what I went through, like you said, I can't image why
someone would make that up.
Would make that up and then make it public. It just makes no sense. So anyone who does do that, it has other issues going on.
So what are some of the things that you advocate? Because I know you go out and you speak on colleges and you tell your story and try to encourage other women. What are some things that you tell people, or potential victims, or people who are just out there, what tips that they can use to, deal with a situation or maybe prevent a situation?
I like to, the first thing I always say is trust your instincts. because I had that little thing in the back of my head while we were even on the date, and
that he didn't feel right.
Yeah, like, the whole thing with his Match.com profile, he had like 9 or 12 pictures. So I know everyone.
Why is that a red flag? Tell me.
In 2004, that was a red flag because it was before camera phones. It was
before cell phone pictures.
It was for social media. It was, what is Facebook's 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so flashback. I know some of you can't remember that far back. Flashback to someone having a profile with that many pictures on it. It's just because, you would have to go through the trouble of scanning them and uploading them. And usually people only had like 2 or 3, different shots, maybe with some friends.
His profile was like too attractive. You're like, wait a minute.
It was way too, yeah. His handle was Dr. Jeff. And he had all these pictures.
Wait a minute. So what about when he lied and said he was an astronaut?
Right. He said, well, he was going to be an astronaut for NASA. He was a NASA doctor. That's
why he was doctor.
Yes. Okay. But while we were sitting there at the bar, he was showing me, there were some things in his story about himself, about his life that sort of weren't like, they weren't fitting, and he was showing me like his IDs and stuff like that, his medical IDs, his NASA IDs. So in the back of my head, I'm thinking,
like, why is he showing me this?
Right, it's a little too much. Weird, stuff's not fitting. But then I'm thinking, okay, Miss Skeptic, it's the first date. You're not going to like grill him on the first date. You're not going to ask all these questions. You're just getting to know each other. Thinking I'm on a date with a normal person.
Yeah.
So I always say trust your instincts, because if I did, and if I trusted my instincts when I woke up the next morning, I knew something was wrong. I knew I could drink 6 drinks and still remember the night before, not just 3. I knew what my alcohol limit was. I knew so many things about myself. And so when you're out and something feels wrong, something is probably wrong. So that's the first thing if you're out in a bar or on a date, or just keep your antenna up, because it really is working for you and not against you. And
I can attest to that too, because like I said, the first time when I was on a date with the guy, and I was 19, I did not feel right about going to his apartment. After the date, we had gone on a date, and he said, well, come back to my apartment. And I was thinking, this is not a good idea. Mm-hmm. This is not a good idea. And I had, I'm 30 now, but in my early 20s, and I think this is really common with a lot of women, I had this desire to be liked, mm-hmm. and to be a nice girl.
Yeah, that's okay.
And so I thought, oh, well, I don't want to make him think I'm whatever. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't thinking about my safety in that way.
Right.
Because, well, I thought about it in that way, but I overrid it because I was like, oh, well, I want to, I don't want him to think I'm a, prude or a bitch or whatever.
Right.
And so I went with him, and that was a huge mistake, obviously. So I would say, ladies, if you don't feel ready, mm-hmm. don't go with the guy to his apartment. If you, like you said, if you're feeling like this is weird, who cares what the guy thinks?
Right.
Be like, all right, I got to go.
Yeah.
Have your phone ready. Maybe have a girlfriend say, I'm going on a date with this guy. I'm meeting him online, or I'm not sure about him. Can you text me? I'll keep my ringer on at an hour in, and I'll pretend I have an emergency. But if things are going well, I'll say, it's nothing. And I know it sounds, kind of like, what is it? Like a cheesy sitcom thing to do, or something on Friends, mm-hmm. an episode of Friends, but just do it. Who cares? It's better to be safe and get to know the guy and.
That's one thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because even though I had told a work friend that I was going out on a match date that night, or I wish I had put more
like effort or thought, or
like more fail safes in place. That I think that's a really good point and a good suggestion. If you're going out on a first date or a second date, put fail safes in place for you personally. Have your friend text you
or check up later.
Somehow. This way, if it's the middle of the night and they haven't heard back from you, something's wrong. because you've already had this set up with your friend. So I think that's really important. I feel it, and especially with assaults and rapes, and it is a lot of times that he said, she said, there won't be physical evidence, or
if you have a girlfriend as a backup, maybe that's evidence.
She's saying, hey, my friend, she was out all night and we had decided to text at this time and she didn't. That's just something to back you up. And a lot of times women it's 48 hours, 72 hours later, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to go to the police. Like, they actually
the puzzle gets together faster.
They're thinking about it, and they're going, what am I doing? I'm going to the police. I can do this. So if there is a couple of days that go by, you just want to be able to, that there isn't necessarily physical evidence after a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
There very well could be, but so you want to, be able to have something set up. And
I know for me, I grew up in a house where my mom was over worried all the time, hyper vigilant, very, very, very strict and protective. And so part of me was like, I guess I didn't take those precautions because I had grown up with them and nothing bad had ever happened.
Mm.
Like, my mom was she's the type of person that like locks like every single lock on the door, like with the chain, and like make sure you have your seatbelt and so growing up I was like, oh my God, she's like over worried, like nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And so I always felt like nothing's going to happen because she was so over worried all the time and nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
And so I was very dismissive of those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, if you're a girl in college or you're kind of coming out of your family life,
mm-hmm.
maybe your parents were overprotective and nothing ever happened, but that doesn't mean, I don't know. I kind of think that they paid me a disservice in a way because they were so over worried that when I got into the real world, like I wasn't paying attention to anything.
Yeah. You're like, what? That's crazy.
And I do still to this day think they're way, way super hyper vigilant for no reason, and they need to relax. But so for me, it kind of backfired where I didn't take any precautions. Mm-hmm. So don't do that, ladies and gents. Take some precautions.
I also think that this would be more speaking to, because the basics are out there about watching your drink and watching where you are and who you're with. But I also think that after the fact, if something has happened, if you've been assaulted, the first step is to speak out. And whether it be a crisis center, whether you do decide to go to the police, or you decide to go to a counselor, to anyone, your best friend, just start by telling anyone, because that's the first step into the next step, because otherwise you're going to be stuck. And we don't want anyone who's been assaulted to be stuck. We want them to move forward and then eventually have a healthy life. So,
because some women, it can traumatize them for a very long time.
Yeah.
Very long time. They won't date. They won't, they'll become secluded, depressed.
Yeah. We don't want that.
It can turn into, fortunately I went to a therapist, but I know women, I have met women that have not spoken about it for over 20 years, finally did, and felt, like they had gone through a 2-week massage because their body was so relaxed. They were holding this tension.
I have heard that too.
For over 20 years, maybe I actually was in a life coaching program with a woman who had been assaulted as a child, who was raped by an uncle. Mm-hmm. She was 69 years old, I think, and had never told anyone.
Yeah.
And she felt like about 40 years later, after she just spoke about it.
Yeah.
Because she had been holding it in.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why and we're not saying counseling is easy, because that's not easy either. It's work. So whatever you decide to do, the speaking out is important. Important, and I think that's the first step if you decide that you need to do something. Tell someone, and then even if it's just your best friend, they know you. You're bouncing it off of them, and they know what would be right for you, or a professor in college, just someone you trust. It's important to talk to them.
I want to talk about men, because you said 1 in 6 men has been sexually assaulted. And I think a lot of times this has been talked about as a woman's issue.
Right. And
you're saying that 1 in 6 guys, the statistic that we know of, has been assaulted. So what does that mean? Is it gay men? Is it just assaulted by a woman? Is it what does that mean?
It's everything. It could be they were assaulted as a child by another man. I mean, there was this big case in Pennsylvania, Penn State, but unfortunately, any way someone could be violated, it has happened.
Do you think there's an extra layer of shame because with sexual assaults?
Men, yeah. And thankfully there are a few organizations that are starting to grow right now that are out there. So like I said, there's 1 in 6, and I can't right now, that's the big one I can think of.
I mean, that's a huge part of the population.
Yes.
That's 1 in 6.
That's the name of the organization. So it's 1in6.org. So if you want to take a look at that. And then this almost never, people might not even think about this, but there is sibling. I know of someone who was assaulted by
incest.
Their brother. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, that's, there's just so many people out there who've been assaulted, and they're just so ashamed because those, everyone just right now, thankfully, is talking about it, but we need to talk about the assaults that aren't what you would think are usual. But they still happen to people, and people are suffering because of it.
And a lot of times I know from some case studies that I've seen that sometimes if people don't get help and they were assaulted as a child, then they can actually re-victimize because it becomes normalized in their mind. Yeah. So you definitely don't want to create the harm on someone else that was created for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So getting help is very, very important. And I really think it's important. I don't like the word mental illness, and I don't like the word, get treatment. It just sounds so like, oh, you need to get help. It just sounds so, hey, just talk to someone.
Right.
It's no big deal. Mm-hmm. It is a big deal, but it's no big deal. Like, because I don't know, getting treatment it just sounds so like intense to me. It's like, go talk to someone, talk to a friend, talk to a therapist. Like, no biggie.
Yeah.
Let's all heal and be happy and healthy.
Exactly.
I don't like that. So what is 1 in 6?
1in6.org. That's
it's a support group, or
it's an organization for men that have been sexually assaulted. So they can go to the website and see what's offered. Just like WAR, Women Organized Against Rape in Philadelphia, is where I got my counseling. And what's wonderful about them is they only counsel and they only offer services to sexual assault and domestic violence victims. So when someone's assaulted, raped, it really is different than someone who needs to see a counselor for any other
childhood trauma or
any
issues,
other illness,
whatever.
Right? Yeah. Whether you're suffering from depression for some reason or whatever. But it really is specialized, and it's good that there are organizations and counselors that only treat these patients, these victims.
The crazy thing to me is the amount of women that I've talked to that have been assaulted is that, I mean, I think it's 100% of the women that I've met, except for you maybe, initially blame themselves. Or I don't know if you had that experience of blaming yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just crazy to me because it has nothing to do with you as far as you didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong.
No.
But I think, since you said yes, now it's 100%. Every single person I've met who has that type of story blame themselves.
Right. And I, when I sat with the other victims of my attacker at the trial, after the trial, we were allowed to speak to each other. Before that, we were just sitting with each other in support. Because the stories were so similar, they wanted to make sure that the defense couldn't say we knew each other
to each other or
beforehand.
made up a story together. Yeah.
But after the fact, And then when some of us had gotten together, actually 5 years ago, ABC News profiled my attacker and myself being one, but 4 of his victims for 1 hour special. And, you know, I got to meet some of the other girls, and we all sat there. One of the girls, he assaulted a week before me. One was a week after. And we're all sitting there thinking, if we had gone and told someone and gone to the police, it wouldn't have happened to the next person and the next person. And as much as we logically know that it's his fault, you still feel a responsibility to the others that were. That's why when I did finally find out and realize what a monster he was, that was why there was no question in my mind that if it was up to me, I was going to do all I could do to make sure he didn't do that again, because I had done enough by not talking about it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that was one thing we definitely had in common. We all looked at each other when we realized the timeline. We looked at each other and said, we were just so disgusted by it, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, we've his victims have all moved on in different ways, and I'm actually friends with one of the girls. 99 times out of 100, we never talk about him unless we're making a joke that he's gonna die in prison. I mean,
you're so cute.
You say you're nice. Well, I'm not that nice. I put someone in prison, and I would do it again, and I will dance on his grave. And I say that as many times. If someone asks me, I will say I will go and dance on his grave. And if someone wants to come with me, they can come with me.
Well, I hope that you have had much healing. Yes. And the women that he has assaulted have had much healing.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I hope that we've been able to bring some information, knowledge, and help any women or men out there struggling with this, because it is not fun at all. Joann, where can we find you online?
I have a website, joannspeaksout.com, and that has, you can see one of my speeches that I used to give every semester at Penn. I was also in an episode of Very Bad Men on Investigation Discovery. That's on there. There's also a resources page where, you know, it goes from teens to, you know, anyone who's interested in getting some help. There's a few organizations they can start with. And I'm on Twitter at Joann Speaks Out, and I follow a lot of organizations that are specifically just for assault, whether it be women, men, and then you can also find what out those organizations and follow them, and that's me.
Well, guys, follow Joann on Twitter. Check out her website. Guys, this has been Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetees.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetees.com. Don't forget, we're now on SoundCloud. Check us out on SoundCloud. We need new followers. Follow us and leave a comment on iTunes or Stitcher if you enjoyed the show. It really helps us out. This has been Out of the Box with Rosie Tran.